is drawing, art as a spiritual practice. And I am so pleased to welcome you and to welcome Cynthia O'Connell to leadership here in this fourth workshop section. Just the perfect workshop to have at this hour. Hope you've got your crayons, your colored pencils, whatever you need in order to get creative. My name is Linnea, and I'm the tech host, which means that I'm going to get us started. The workshop is 50 minutes long. I'm also going to be the one who ends it and who gives us all the 50-minute heads up. That is, I'm going to give 5 minutes to Cynthia at the end, and then I'm going to take 5 minutes at the end to tell you what's coming next and to ask you to do that little mini pop-up evaluation that we've all become good at. So how great that I get to welcome Cynthia into this leadership here. And here's what I want to say about her. Reverend Cynthia O'Connell, her constant passion is in creating art and finding the intersection with faith and ministry. She holds a BA with honors in religious studies, a Master of Theological Studies, and an MDiv, so she loves school, I think. Her passion for art has led her to create Drawing the Word, which is a blog that she intends to publish in book form when the time is right. Her website is Godflinger. Is that Godflinger? Oh, so cool. And her blog, Drawing the Word, is where she shares her original art inspired by scripture, along with a short reflection. So I'm going to hand it straight over to her and just leave it with you to just have a most marvelous workshop hour.
Thank you, Lydia. So I'm just gonna, first of all, thank you, everyone. I had no idea how many people were gonna come. So the goal of this, I think I put in the description, is not to necessarily make something pretty. It's about engaging scripture in a different way than reading and discussion, but as a way to maybe give you some new insight. Maybe you come up with some new concepts through the practice of doing something creative. We are all creative because we're humans. So that's my kind of premise with this. So I'm just gonna start my screen share, basic, and I wanna start with, make sure I'm on the right slide before I do that, so I don't give anything away. There we go. And then I'm gonna do this. And then I'm going to do this, which you can't see me doing. So as Linnea mentioned, this is Drawing the Word, Art as Spiritual Practice. And just two reminders. The first is, if you haven't yet, please grab a piece of paper and something to draw or color with. It can be pencil, crayons, pencil, pens, markers, whatever you've got on hand is perfectly fine. And the second reminder is that this session is recorded. They are available for the weekend to anyone who couldn't get to, they had more than one they wanted to get to, what have you. So please don't share your deepest, darkest secrets in this time. And if you do, let us know so they can be edited out. So those are reminders. If you have tech issues, need help, send Linnea a message in the chat and she will help you out. Okay. So I'm going to start with this image. I'm going to guess that most of you have probably seen this. There's probably a picture of it in your church if you go to church. I have one at my church. So whenever we think about art and sacred art and images, this is one that probably pops up in your head. So this is actually called The Head of Christ. It's by Warner Salomon. It was created in 1940. If you didn't know, it's been reproduced over 500 million times worldwide by the end of the 20th century. They even made little small pocket size, wallet size ones for you to put in your wallet, in your pocket, to use as a devotional. It has become kind of the basis for the visualization of Jesus for millions of Christians around the world. And so, as you can see, it's a very European white Jesus. And this has become kind of the dominant image when people think of who Jesus was. And Jesus is, as we know, wasn't a white European man, a Jew living in Palestine. If you think again to yourself, what are some popular sacred images? Maybe this one comes in your mind. So this is from the Sistine Chapel, painted by Michelangelo, who was inspired by the phrase from Genesis, God created man in his own image. And according to the Sistine Chapels, to their website, they say that this Michelangelo decided to represent the divine breath of life, with God and Adam's fingers almost touching each other. This famous gesture represents the creation of the first man with the creator's index finger ready to strike a spark upon contact with Adam's hand. I've always found this image particularly interesting, not just because it's famous, but the way God's hand is very kind of stretched straight out, but yet Adam's hand's kind of limply like, oh, okay, maybe I'll talk to you, or maybe I'll have a relationship with you. One of the reasons why I love art so much and sacred art, it communicates so much to us without words, and it creates opportunities for us to think about what and who God is through the way through our choices of art, through our choices of color, through our choices of shapes and images and all those things. So I wanted to start with those two images, which I'm assuming you've probably seen before. This next one you might not be familiar with. So this was only recently discovered in 2018. A fresco was unearthed in an Italian catacomb, and it depicts a 5th century image of a woman named Cerula. And it shows her surrounded by an open flaming gospel books, which was the symbol of bishops. So academics argue that this discovery shows incredible significance and proves that women had senior roles in the early church and were even bishops. So this is where art starts becoming, I don't want to say political, but it starts moving beyond something, oh, this is a beautiful image, to saying something about our beliefs and about who has power. I'll leave it that one. So that's a newer one you might not be familiar with. These images. Now, this is known as the Life of Jesus Mafa. It was an initiative undertaken in the 1970s to help teach the gospel in northern Cameroon. A French Catholic missionary, Francois Vidal, worked with Mafa Christian communities in Cameroon to create a catalog of paintings depicting the life of Jesus as an African man. The plan was to build a resource that would help Mafa people to teach from the Bible in a way that connects with their own community. You can access all of this series of paintings through the Vanderbilt Divinity Library, and they're free to use, these images. But again, it's how we just tell the story of who God is, and the relationships matter in our images. And I wanted to draw our attention to some of these. This might not be the first image you have when you think of the Nativity, but it's a powerful image. It helps us, I think, to see the scriptures in a new way and to see ourselves in scripture in a new way. So that's kind of I wanted to start with just these images that you may or may not be familiar with. Now, you're not going to have to do anything this detailed or amazing. I'm not expecting this, but if someone in the group is another Michelangelo, that'd be very awesome. But what I wanted to do is share a little bit about my own story, and specifically how I got to this point of seeing art as a spiritual practice and as a way to engage the Bible and engage the story of Scripture in a new way. I'm going to start with showing some images that are mine, and they're not pretty. So I was taking a course when I was working on my MDiv where the professor would start each class with a lectio divina, where he would read a piece of scripture. There would be silence. You were to contemplate on it. He would read it again, and there'd be more silence. Now, I'm the type of person that I can't stand silence. Yet I am a minister, I know. but I need something to focus and to engage with. And so when he would read these pieces of scriptures, I started to draw them. So you can see here, there's the first one is, sorry, I'll scroll back there. The first one is Psalm 1. And the second one there is Psalm 85. Now, can I tell you what was going through my brain at the time? No. These were just spontaneous. I'm going to just draw what I'm hearing. And that's what I did. I have another one. This one is John 16. And so you can see from the first one, there's starting to be a little more thinking about what's going on. And I focused on this phrase of Jesus withdrawing from kingship. And I had this idea of like, here's this chasm and a bridge, and there's this separation. And so in this drawing, I'm starting to engage the scripture more, not just in a literal way, but starting to think about concepts. What's actually happening in this story? This one's a little way more detailed. So this is the story of the woman who has been caught in adultery from John 8, verses 1 to 11. And she's brought before Jesus, and the Pharisees say, you know, what's the law? Like, what do you have to say about this? And what I noticed in particular about this story, what drew my focus was the movement. So first, you have Jesus. He's at the Mount of Olives. He's at the temple, and then he sits down to teach people. And then the scribes and Pharisees come, and they bring this woman who stands before everyone. And then Jesus bends down, and he writes in the ground with his finger. And then he stands, straightens up again. And then he bends down again, and then the woman gets up and stands. So I kept noticing these movements that were happening. And so what I focused on when I was drawing was this. In my image, you'll see, you know, some people are sitting, some people are standing. And I wrote these words: sat, bend, wrote on the ground. It was through the drawing that it drew my attention to the story in a new way, to look at what are the people in the story actually doing, and their movements, and how might that help me understand the scripture or give me some new insight. And so that was what I was starting to notice when I was doing these, which started out as simply a way for me to not fall asleep essentially in class, just to keep myself focused early in the morning. So I actually still have a whole little book of all these little drawings. I kept them. And so I kind of played with this idea. What if like I start kind of really focusing on this, not just as a way to keep me awake, but let's do something specific with this. So in 2021, I decided, again for a class, because if I can make art count as a class assignment, I'm good. I decided to do these series of scriptures. So the 5 Sundays of Lent, and each Sunday I did a drawing. And now these are way more detailed. There's way more color in them. They took a lot more time than my quick little sketches. The one on your bottom right with the arrow, that is the story of John the Baptist baptizing in the river, and, you know, prepare the way. And I had this image of the arrow pointing towards the way we're supposed to go. And so again, like, this was a way to start thinking about the scriptures in a new way. Way more detailed, way more time, lots of color. Time passes, I kind of let this go. Then I started thinking about, well, you know what, maybe there's a way to do this art so it's not so simple that I'm not spending any time on it, but it's not so much time that I don't have time for anything else. And that's where I am at today, which has become my Drawing the Word series. And what I do is every week I have to preach. As if you work in the church, you know what that's like. Sometimes you're thinking, oh, I've got a great idea. Sometimes you're like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about this week. I've preached on this passage so many times, I got nothing. And so what I started to do as part of my reflection and my study was, I'm just going to draw whatever I'm going to preach on. And the goal is not to make something, it's not to spend a lot of time. I can do these drawings in maximum an hour. not to spend time focusing on, oh, this proportion doesn't work and this shape is not the right shape, but just to purely go with what I'm seeing. And so the first one is the story here of Matthew, where the disciples say to Christ, when did we see you in prison? And so I kind of focused on that image of prison. The one in your middle, this is a story of the woman who searches for, I think it's the lost coin. And so that became the focus. The third one, this is the prophet who is not welcomed in his own home with the stones being thrown at them. And so if you look at these images, they're very literal. Like, this is what this is happening in the story, and that's what I draw. Sometimes, though, what I do is it's a little different than that. Sometimes it's a little more symbolic. So, for example, these three. Now, if you can guess what these ones are, I will be really impressed. So the first one, this is from Matthew 22:34-40. And it's the concept that love hangs, that the scripture and everything hangs on love. And so I had this concept of the hearts hanging on the Bible. The one in the middle is Luke 6:27-38. This is the story of the measure you give with the grains is the measure you will get back. And so I had this concept of the hand handing out this measure, these grains, and I put them in the shape of a heart, again, kind of indicating love. Luke 6:17-26. This one comes kind of at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, where we're warned about false prophets. Really interesting thing to preach on, actually. And I think at the time there was a lot of noise happening in the media, and I toyed with this idea of prophets versus prophets with an FITS, and asking those kind of deeper questions of, who are behind some of what is actually going on when we are attempting to change systems, to change things, or this idea of might speak love, but behind us it's about money. So this one was a little more symbolic, not so much literal. And so sometimes that's what happens when I do these things. I get these kind of more metaphorical things, but most often or not, it's very literal. Now, you might be wondering, okay, why do this? What's the goal? The goal, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, is not to create something pretty, but is to engage in scripture and to engage in that creative aspect that I fully believe is in all of us. We often, our images for God are often that we talk about God as creator or God as the potter. And we talk about we're created in the image of God. Well, if that's true, then God's a creator, then we also have creative abilities. One of the things that happens when you do art is sometimes you need to get really close to a piece to kind of get on the details, but then sometimes you need to stand back to see the whole picture. And I see that as a metaphor in many ways of how the spirit moves and how God interacts in the world. Sometimes you can feel the presence of the spirit very closely, but sometimes it might be a little more distant. And when we do these things, when we engage in art and when we engage in creative practices, it connects us to that, I think, that divine spark that Michelangelo spoke of between, Adam and God. It connects us deeply to that. And I also notice that when I go to do other creative things, such as, writing liturgy or writing a sermon, it comes quicker because I've already been kind of using that part of my brain that is engaged in those kinds of practices. And so I've noticed that when I do these drawings, it's a lot easier for me to continue in that creative process of writing. A couple other things I just wanted to point out in terms of my own work before I let you all get a taste of how to do this. is that I deliberately, in my images, particularly images depicting people, I leave the faces blank for two reasons. The first is practical. It takes a lot of time to draw faces and it's very difficult. But I also do it to invite people to see themselves. Um, I also often don't draw hands. These are two examples where I have. Hands take so much time. If you speak to anyone who's an artist, they will tell you the hardest thing to do is draw hands. And so, and I always do a few little key things. I don't know if anyone ever notices, but whenever I depict Jesus in any of my images, he's always in purple. I don't tell people that. I see if people figure that out. But so I just wanted to share a couple of those kind of things in case you're wondering about why do I do what I do and what I choose. Before I move on, I realized I've spoken a lot and I might have spoken a little quickly, and I apologize. This is a new format for me in terms of doing this. I usually do it in person. I wanted to see if there were any questions about what I've talked about or questions about my own art or anything like that.
Want to take down the screen share for a moment while
Yeah, I can do that. I have powers.
you have the powers?
Yes.
Thoughts, folks?
On a practical level, I'm wondering what you're drawing with, because if they're pencil crayons, they're very nice ones.
So it just so happens I have here all of my pencil crayons.
Okay, thank you.
These are a high-end ones. They're Prismacolor. I'm not kind of trying to like sell you. I'm not sponsored by Prismacolor, but they're a higher end one, so they blend better.
Right.
And they're more pigmented. So that's why I use them. I got them as a gift for my partner, and I was like, these are amazing.
Thank you.
Erin had her hand up as well.
Well, I don't really have a question, but just more, I just really appreciate you sharing this, because I started doing this myself and I've never met anybody else who does it. So yeah, thanks for sharing and telling us a little bit about your process.
Yep. So, Amelia, I see.
Yeah, this is just fascinating. I'll just share. I regularly teach biblical stories in a jail setting, and I do what's called a storyboard, where they kind of do the story in parts. Anyway, I loved seeing those initial ones you had, because a lot of the storyboards, are of that sort, because they only had a couple of minutes for each, little part of the story. So, but I found a really good way for people to pay attention to the details in the story. But I haven't really done it myself that much, kind of as a spiritual practice. I've gotten the stuff to do that, but I don't do it. So I appreciate getting some motivation from you. Thank you.
Of course. One of the things I was gonna say too as well is this can be done not just individually. It can be done in a group setting in two ways. You could just have like a group like we are, and each person individually does something as we'll do. But I've also done this where I had like large pieces of canvas or glass where people were divided into groups, and you were given a scripture and together you had to make something. So some people chose like to just like each person took a section. Some people are like, no, we're going to come up with a concept and work on it together. Some people went for a more, I would say, Jackson Pollock, which is kind of just splashes of paint and color and more like that. So this can be done as like in a group setting. And again, it's very interesting to watch people engage scripture as a group in that way, because it seems to bring out some, I don't say it's less divisive, but people are like, oh yeah, and then are you good at drawing trees? You draw the tree. And so it's more, there's just a better kind of group working together on something, creating something together is a really cool thing. Okay, because I want to make sure we all have enough time to do this. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen. If you have other questions too, don't be afraid to throw them in the chat. We were here. Okay. So Mhm. Okay, so this is going to be our process. I'm going to read the text. I also will have the text on screen. So if you're someone who needs to read in order to understand, that will be there for you.
Hey, Cynthia, by the way, now we see your presenter view.
Oh, interesting.
He and I were working out, yeah, the neat options there are.
Okay, let's go back this way. And I'm going like this. I don't really need my notes anymore anyway. So let's just do it like this. We're good? Okay. So what's going to happen is, yeah, so I'll read the text and you're going to listen to it. And then, all right. The second, I'm going to read again. So the first time you don't have to do anything, just listen to it or read it. The second time, I want you to pay attention to any words, specific words that you're really hearing or seem to really connect with you. You can jot them down if that helps. If you're someone who thinks in images, which I've discovered not everyone is, I just walk through life assuming everyone thinks like with pictures in their heads all the time. They don't. So you might think in concepts or in words, or there might even just be colors that come to you. Whatever those are, keep those, focus on those. Once you've got maybe a word or two or a concept or an image, just start to draw. It can be simple. It can be shapes. It can be stick figures. It can be simply colors. Or it can be literal, if that's how you're seeing it. The goal is not to spend all your time planning out this perfect organized picture. It is just to simply draw whatever is coming to you, whatever is making your hand want to move, just go with it. If it doesn't look good, don't worry about it. That's what erasers are for anyway, but just go with it, okay? So I chose for us today, I thought I would go something with something very familiar. The reason I did that was I'm hoping by choosing something familiar, when you do this exercise, something different might come to you. Maybe you'll hear something new, something that you never noticed in something that is so familiar. So this is the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd. So I'm going to start. I'm going to read it. I'll pause, give a little bit of silence. Then I'll read it again. And then the second time, start to do that focusing on keywords, concept, images, colors, emotions, whatever it is that is grabbing you. Focus on those, okay? So this is Psalm 23, a Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. Psalm 23, a Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. I'm going to invite you to take the next 15 minutes and to start drawing the word.
Did you say how much time we have for this?
15. I'm going to give you your 3-minute warning. If you're not finished, that's okay. So what's going to happen next is I'm going to invite, I wish we had time where every person could explain what they made and share the details. But if you do something that like this in a group setting, please do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite those of you who are comfortable, because art is very personal. If you want just to hold up whatever you've done to your cameras, you don't have to say anything. Or if you don't want to share the image, if you wanted to throw a few words in the chat of the things that came to you, you can do that. But I think this will make a lovely kind of screenshot. So everyone show what you got. This is cool. Amazing. Oh, someone with painting even. This is a great, amazing. So I wanted to leave us with a few questions for you to take with you in terms of if you decide to do this for yourself. So the first question is, what surprised you? What questions or concepts did your final image bring to life? What did you find difficult? Did you discover something new about this familiar scripture? And how might you incorporate this into your spiritual life, this practice into your spiritual life, your vocation, or other work? I will share those just on the screen again, just so if you were wanting to get a better look at those. So, what surprised you? What questions or concepts did your final image bring to life? What did you find difficult? Did you discover something new about this very familiar scripture? And how might you incorporate this practice into your spiritual life, your prayer life, your vocation, or other work? And I'm just going to give one final thing about what I did. Is what I noticed. I had written down the words cup overflow waters green valley. And so for me, what this brought out was, what if the cup overflowing is that river that we walk by in the story. So that's where I'm like, I don't know, is there an answer to that? But again, it's just, I saw these connections between these different things. So that's what drawing the word is about. I am so open to, hearing back from you if this is something you're thinking about doing, and if you do it, how it went, and how you might change it to reflect your own personal style or whatever your context is. And I think I'm just about 2 minutes short of the 50-minute mark, Linnea.
You are, which actually gives you 7 minutes. I wonder if those great questions that you asked, I wonder if you want to open that up for people to,
Sure.
like to briefly, I guess,
Yeah.
give each other an opportunity to speak too. But I bet some of us are just dying to put
Sure. I'll throw those questions into the chat just in case. Oh, it might help if I actually copied it before I tried to paste it.
Yeah, who'd like to speak out loud?
I'll speak up.
Go ahead, Erin. Go ahead, Erin.
What I really loved was it brought me, of course, into the emotion of the scripture. But what I like about this practice we just did is it allowed me to linger there longer. If I just read the scripture, it maybe is read in about a minute. But here I got to stay in that space for 15 minutes, and I could continue elaborating on this drawing. That's something I really loved just now.
Oh, thanks, Erin.
For me, because the Psalms focuses on the Lord is my, so a lot of the drawing is it's not so much who God is, or in the New Testament who Jesus is. It's more who I am in God, and how God is in my life.
Thanks, Stella.
I think in terms of a spiritual practice that would help to hone the craft of telling for me, because it might be a place that I would start, even though I'm a terrible drawer. It might be a place that I would start in terms of trying to remember the order of what I'm trying to tell. So for me, my drawing started with the shepherd's crook and then moved on to the path, the green grass on one side, the still waters on the other, the darkness at the end of the path, the cup overflowing into So it might, to bring it into the spiritual practice of telling the word, I think the two of them would attach well, especially if you are a visual learner.
Great. Thanks, Catherine.
Maybe I'll just tag on to the end of that, because what we've been doing in Ukulele Church is for 3 weeks we've been looking at the Beatitudes, and you can't see it all, but I put them in the shape of a clock. At each one of them, because it's the order that's the hard part, right? And then drawn and encouraged others to draw a picture at whatever time of the clock it is, and to then picture that when you are telling it, because it's the randomness that's the difficult part in so many ways in telling.
I can see that working for the creation story. It's like, which came first, the birds, the air, or was the fish of the sea, and what happened?
I did some drawing for that, yeah.
Well, I found that it was they got fairly literal drawing to start with, and then as I was drawing the pasture and the water, and the yellow was for restores my soul, and going around, I got to the table, and I thought, this is no good being alone at the table. So there's like 4 of us at the table. It's just, and then in looking back, I thought, oh yeah, no, not alone in the valley either. So I had to start putting like someone walking together right at the beginning of the path, and then in the valley, and anyway, it was that was after I'd kind of just drawn the basic literal-ish order of it. So that was a great insight. It was something new. Or something intuitive, but it hit me in a different way. So and good for telling, I think.
Thanks, Jen.
I think this would really help me slow down my preparations, whether it's especially for preaching, because I know the passages so well after having preached through the lectionary so many times that I tend to read it once and then start, right? So it would help me dwell a bit more with the passage. And also for telling, as well as for planning worship, it definitely makes me pay closer attention to what words and what translation, because what really struck me when I did it was that I heard "I shall not want" as an ought or a should, right? I didn't hear it as I won't want for anything. It was don't want. That's what I heard. And I drew a stop sign with want on it. So it just struck me how important the words we use really are. Even when I know that's not what that passage means. That's what I heard, right? So, yeah.
It's the preconceived or the old baggage that's attached to the old language. So the new other translations are good, but this practice also, like, I love your word dwell, causes us to dwell there and take more time and go quieter inside ourselves with it all.
Any last final words? Okay, Lenny, I think that means it's all you.
No, you know what it really means? Everybody's still drawing, and that's just